about, and yeah, lots of stuff going on.
Let's do it.
Okay, first up, let's thank our sponsor, Ortus Solutions. Without them, we wouldn't be able to make this podcast. So thank you, Ortus. They make CodeBox, CommandBox, ForgeBox, TestBox, a lot of other boxing out there. And we always give you guys a few ways to say thanks to Ortus Solutions. And some of those things are liking and subscribing to our videos up on YouTube. So thanks everybody for joining us in the chat. I see Daniel Mejia and John Barnett already in there chatting. Thank you. So like and subscribe those to those videos and get all the updates when we go live. And then we have a Reach for the Stars fork and star our repos. So there's a cool little GitHub command box extension you wrote, Eric, to make that easier, right?
That's right. Anything I can do to be lazy.
Yep. It's called efficiency, not laziness.
Okay, efficient.
Yeah. So also subscribe to our podcast on your podcast app if you guys listen through there. And then we have accounts up on CFcast, so free or paid accounts on CFcast supports us, so we appreciate that. And then we have an Ortus book, 102 CodeBox HMVC Quick Tips and Tricks up on Gumroad. And of course that goes towards, supporting Ortus too. And we appreciate all the pull requests and issue files and everything else you guys do as well. But those are just, a few of the ways you can say thanks.
And of course, we'd like to thank all of our Patreon supporters. I choose a different adjective every time I'm on this podcast. And today's is brilliant. Our brilliant Patreon supporters who are providing 92% of the funding for this podcast. We will tell you more about them and how you can support and what perks you get at the end of this episode.
Yep, and for those watching, you can see there's different packages too. There's 7 different packages you can pick from up on patreon.com/ortussolutions. But as Eric said, we'll tell you more soon. Okay, so news and events. This is a little bit sneaky, but Into the Box call for speakers closed on Sunday, April 17th. But did it?
Did it? You can go right now to that same Google form, and I'm going to put it in the chat, and still submit a topic, and we'll still look at it.
Yep. Yeah, so we haven't had our meeting yet, and usually we leave it a little bit late, but we like to give deadlines because no one ever does something unless there's a deadline. So now the deadline is passed, so really it's your last chance. So go submit something. There's a couple of perks to being a speaker. You get some accommodation, you get a free ticket to the conference. All those things add up. So go fill it out, put in your ideas, and we'll discuss them and pick the speakers. We really want to announce that very soon. So please, if you're thinking about it, please submit it. We do want more community members, in the conference. We don't want it to be a box show, right? This is already a box show, so we don't need more of those. Okay.
I know for myself, I always find it so interesting to see how other people use modules or libraries I've built or that Ortus has built. Uncovers a lot, so we really need your perspective on those.
Yeah, for sure. Some of the best sessions are different people doing different things with command box. Like Brad loves seeing those. Matthew Clemente's done it before, and there's been a few other people too. And yeah, we love those. So if you guys talk about that, then we can talk about other things, and we got lots to talk about. So speaking of talking about something, last week I gave a last-minute mention to Scott Steinbeck about his curl converter, and so I've made a new little category here, CFML Community Submissions, and so this is a pretty cool little tool. I'm going to share my screen if you want to tell them a little bit about it, or have you even seen it yet, Eric?
I have seen it, yeah. So this is a website that you can paste in a curl command, what you would have in your command line, and convert it to one of a bunch of different languages. So there's your common ones like Java, JavaScript, Python, but now there is a CFML category. This is contributed by Scott, and it uses the HTTP service. I'm assuming that's because that was probably the easiest one to to use rather than tag based, but still really cool. You can go check that out. We have the link here in the show notes. Yeah. Of course, I see this, and now I want one that makes it hyper, just because I like the hyper one.
And there was actually
not
one
that different from the CFML script version. Has a lot of the same methods. It's just a little nicer in some ways.
He said it was the most backward compatible, but it's still in script. But actually, Andrew Davis has one that he wrote that converts stuff to hyper, and he also did a sequel to Query Builder, real simple ones. And I'll try and find the link and add it to the show notes. But
I need to I need to put the query builder on the QB website. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yep, but I always like comparing it to the Java stuff. So if you ever feel bad about CFML, go to Java and look at the pain they have to go through to do something simple. I mean, like that, this is a more complicated example here, but if you just do a simple get and you look at the Java version, it's still painful. You got to make like 50 different things just to inject and then obviously go to JavaScript. And, if we look at JavaScript and go to CFML and it's pretty similar, not quite the same syntactic sugar, but it's backward compatible and across engine. It's kind of cool. And Scott did mention that it did take some digging to get into the CFML stuff to get everything to work and, dig into the source code of Lucy to try and make sure it was compatible across and everything. So thanks, Scott, for doing that. But yeah, that
So
was
I
my...
assume that if I go to the closed pull requests, I can find this, right? We could see how Scott did this. That would be fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, probably not on the podcast, but
Yep. So it's pretty cool. And then let's see. There was another one that James Moberg tweeted about, and this is sort of the thing I wanted to get at with this, is the community submissions. There's lots of little places where they list languages and CFML's not there. So if we can, as a community, start checking those boxes off and getting rid of them and saying, okay, CFML's listed here now, CFML's listed there. It'd be pretty cool for the community, So it was kind of nice. So if we keep doing that, and we'll talk more about James's tweet when we get to the blog section. But anyways, so just a heads up, we like that. Let's get CFML on all those lists because, it's not dead yet, right?
not dead yet. I'm thinking of Monty Python yet now.
So we also had an update from Host Media. So a lot of people asking questions about hosting lately, and Host Media is one of those companies that actually does some work with this little CF Manager. And so they've released an update, and I'll share my screen. But it's a cPanel-based plugin that allows users to manage ColdFusion data source names without having to contact the server administrators, and basically, they have to go and add them via CFadmin. And so it basically does that for you. So when you're running a cPanel type setup, you can add your site, add your database, and then you can add using CF Manager, add your data sources in there. So it gives you a little access to some of those things that you normally need the CFadmin. And on shared hosting, you don't get that, right? So it's kind of cool, and so they've updated that. So Host Media has that plugin for cPanel. So if you guys are looking for hosting, maybe that's a good option.
Nice. All right, we have some webinars coming up. The first one we want to talk about is the Mid Michigan ColdFusion User Group. Mr. John Farrar is presenting on 13 ways to modernize with Vue 3.
I need to see
Lucky
this one.
number 13. So
I know I said good luck for the presentation. He's like, oh, I might need some 13 ways. I'm like, it's okay. It's not Friday the 13th with a full moon. You're good. So
this is on April 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern time, online. So anybody can join, and it says learn everything that is new and how to transition to Vue 3.
Yep. Sounds great. I need to learn more of this. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've just been waiting for the whole Vue ecosystem to kind of catch up, and I don't know, maybe a new project. It's just Vue 2 works so well, I don't need to upgrade.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point too. I know that like Quasar that I use, and we use Nux in some projects. I mean, there's just not a big push for Vue 3, so we're still happy with Vue 2. But I'd like to see what's new and what's different and everything. So yeah, check out John tonight. And then you've got a talk coming up here. So Ortus webinar, April, cbSecurity, passwords, tokens, JWTs with Eric Peterson. That's April 29th at 11 a.m. Central Time. And then obviously we can get that information on the Ortus webinars page. But you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, cbSecurity is our tool for authorization and authentication. And there's lots of different approaches to it. Maybe you're building an API and you want some sort of really full featured JWT. Maybe you need to have two different applications talking to each other. Maybe you have your traditional users logging in. Maybe you have a combination of all those. So we're going to go see how cbSecurity gives you a unified interface to deal with all those different types of logins. And it should be a good time.
Yep. So go register now. You get your little email reminder, and you can put it on your calendar so you don't forget. And then Hawaii ColdFusion Meetup Group. They're using ColdFusion RMs with Nick. I always get this wrong. Kowalski. That's going to be April 29th as well, but that'll be later in the day at 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. So much later in the day for everybody. So you can see both. You can make it work. But it's talking about Cold Fusion's ORM using Hibernate essentially. And Nick's an adjunct professor at Michigan State and does quite a lot of work with the Mid Michigan CFUG and the Apache Foundation, and so he's a great one to watching for this. So look forward to seeing that, and yeah, it'll be a good session.
Okay, well, we have a couple Cold Fusion meetups coming as well. Adobe workshops. And we have a full list we'll put here at the end, but the ones left here in April, we have one this Thursday. I love this title. It is Adobe Cold Fusion Truths by Mark Takata. And this is all about Booleans in Cold Fusion. Wow. Which I'm as much interested in it because of the title as I am about how can you make a talk of 45-minute workshop on Booleans. So that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I've run into a whole lot of those Boolean serialization issues. We have a Dr. No in town in one of the medical apps that I wrote. It keeps calling him Dr. False whenever I import, so I have to go through and check to see if it's actually the text no or if it's actually a Boolean because the serialization messes up and just little things like that,
Yay for dynamic languages, right?
Yeah. And then we also have the European workshop with Damien Bruendonks, April 26th at 9 a.m. Central European time. And then we have the full list, as Eric said. There's another workshop in May and June already announced, so it's kind of nice. So lots of good stuff there. Okay, so that wraps up our news for right now. But we have some CFcast content too.
Yes, by our very own Gavin here. We are publishing our first ForgeBox package with Gavin. You can check it out now. We're up to 5 videos. So we're talking about creating our accounts via the command box or online. And soon we'll be publishing what we've been working on.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, obviously ForgeBox, you can use it without creating an account, but if you want to start publishing a package, that's when you need an account. And so we go through the different steps. And I try and compare the using the web interface versus the CLI for most of these because some people are scared of the CLI still, and it's okay. It takes time to get used to it. Eventually you'll find it makes you more efficient, not lazy. But yeah, the UI is good for when you're trying to understand something. So, but yeah, we got more videos.
UI is also really nice to just browse and see which ones you want, see what the differences are.
Mm-hmm.
I like browse in the web interface and then I publish everything from the CLI. So.
Yeah, I mean there's definite pros and cons. I mean the CLI has some pretty cool workflows that just aren't quite there through the web UI for some things, but like you say, it's easy to scroll through a browser than it is through text. Even though Brad does good work on Command Box's interface. Sure. But anyway. So we got more of those videos coming soon, so keep an eye out for later this week. There should be more of the ForgeBox, publish your first ForgeBox package. And then, yeah, lots of content in there and more ForgeBox stuff coming soon as well. So, okay, that's your CFcast update. Let's look at some conferences.
We just finished DevNexus. We had a few people there. Brad and Luis were there giving some presentations. I'm sure those are going to be making their way into ours as well. I think Brad's was on making a pull request. In fact, he made pull requests against some of my repos for fun, and I was taunting him back and forth on it. And Luis talked about Alpine.js, our new Vue Lite.
Yep, and that's what I like to call it. I actually used it last week for some content box updates in the admin. It was pretty nice. But yeah, Brad and Luis had a great time. They really enjoyed it. It was really well put on. It's a great conference. And I saw Ray actually tweeting in Luis's session about how he hadn't seen it yet. And he's like, oh my gosh, this looks like Vue Lite, basically. And he says he loves it. And so that was kind of cool to see too. So, Ray's there as well, learning and representing Adobe. So yeah, there's a few other tweets.
Maybe we won't ever make it to Vue 3, Gavin. Maybe we're all jumping in on Alpine.
Well, Alpine's great for like those little in-page elements, like basically you want this little one web component to do something. But I see, Vue for the bigger stuff. Like the computer properties in Alpine is kind of like not really computer properties. They're kind of fake-ish. And I had to do a little tweaking to get them to be reactive versus, view. So I mean, there's definitely some pros and cons to everything, but Alpine is great for lots of little sprinkly stuff for sure. Definitely love that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure computed properties, side note, are my favorite thing in Vue. Like, you can take everything else away, but that, I use them all the time. I love it.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that I still was able to use them in Alpine, but once I got it too complicated, it just broke down a little bit. So it was probably my fault for doing it wrong.
As is most things in programming, it's usually our own fault.
Yeah. Okay. We also have DockerCon coming up soon. So we have the registration form is up for that. You can sign up, and they even have some free workshops, I believe, the day before. So I'm going to share my screen for those watching. But yeah, so May 9th is the virtual workshop, and then May 10th is the interactive virtual event. It's all free, and they do try to offer, the same materials later, so you actually have earlier and later like workshops. You can do a 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 10 a.m. Pacific, or a 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific. So they're trying to work with you so you can make those workshops even around your work schedule. It's kind of nice. So go sign up for that one. It's free, and there's a lot of really good speakers there. And as you can see, the schedule is now there too, so you can find out what is actually there, and maybe start marking which ones you're going to look at. So pretty neat.
All right. Speaking of Vue, the US Vue.js conference is June 8th through the 10th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That's a hard word to say. Sorry. You can find out more at us.vuejs.org.
Yep. Again, they have one-day workshop.
Code and Vue.
Yep, they have one-day workshop and 2 days of conference. The call for speakers is open. The deadline is actually passed, so I guess we'll have to see. But I noticed they have a speakers tab, and it's not working. Maybe they haven't added them to this page yet. So
should have used Alpine. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
But yeah, so they're adding the information about that. You've got the workshops and everything here, and past events is kind of nice. You've got some videos and some of the previous content available, so it's pretty cool. I really like Vue, obviously, but the Vue conference is a really nice conference. So I'm hoping to make it there in person. See how that goes this year. We also had that conference. So
let's talk about that conference.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that they had so much great content on that conference. So they have online monthly events, like, they have webinars, they have like little mini conferences, and they've got actual in-person conferences in Texas and Wisconsin. So they have 2 a year. And Daniel Garcia, who's been one of the hosts on the podcast lately, is actually speaking there. So that's going to be pretty cool. So if you're looking for more good content, that.us/activities shows lots of great things. I'm sharing my screen. So you'll see that they've got upcoming, events. And you'll see as they go further on, there's like multiple on certain days. And then, there's just a lot of different activities. And I mean, these are pretty neat. But they have like summer camps. So you see Camp Counselor. But there's a lot of good content on their website. You can see the events, their activities are sort of the daily stuff, but you've got the online conferences, the in-person conferences. But yeah, it looks like a really cool conference. And they sold me when they said it was in a resort that had a water park in there. So I'm like, maybe I can make it.
Now, do we know, is Daniel in the Texas or the Wisconsin one?
He's doing the Wisconsin one. So,
okay.
Yeah. So if you look here, I'll share my screen again.
Look, there's Ray Camden. He's in this one as well.
Yep. But yeah, so there's a lot of cool information here. I really want to actually look through this talk. I think he gave this ITBs, updating it a little bit for this, but talking about using Postman and webhook.site and ngrok to enhance your workflow with API development and testing. So that's one of the ones I did not see in ITB, so I got to go watch that on CFCast. But
there you go.
But yeah, I'm hoping to get there in person at least sometime. It's a good excuse to go play at a water park. So, and then CF Summit is coming up too. We have some official-ish dates from Adobe. I'm trying to get more concrete from Mark Takata. Last we saw it was going to be on the 3rd and 4th of October. and that would be the conference, 2-day conference, and then on the 5th, they'll be doing their Adobe Certified Professional, 1-day class with tests. So we're hopefully we get more concrete information on that real soon, and we'll let you know as soon as we do. Okay, so next up, ITB, Into the Box. We still have early bird pricing available to April 30th. Again, we did have concrete dates, but we're sort of in flux right now, waiting for CF Summit to be more official so we can make sure we don't butt up against them. As their unofficial dates means that basically you'd fly to Houston and then fly straight from Houston to Vegas, and we don't want to get divorced. So we're trying to split them up a little bit. So we're working on our dates, looking at different options there. But the early bird tickets are available until April 30th. So save some money and do that. And again, call for speakers. We want more speakers, right, Eric?
That's right. And let me let you in on a little inside baseball here with the webinar coming up next week. I've barely started that, and I agreed to give it so I would write this talk. I do the same thing for all my conferences. I put in the subject I wish I had written, and then when they accept it, I finally have to do it. So if that's you, if you're like, I don't have anything written, just put in the idea and you'll get it done. I believe in you.
Yep. Deadlines are a big motivator to do something. Because you don't want to look like an idiot.
The fear of looking dumb. Yep. You won't. You'll be awesome.
Yep. And don't worry, if someone asks you like something you don't know the answer to, don't make it up. Just say, you know what, I haven't looked into that yet, but I will look into that and get back to you. And like that's a great answer. And a lot of people, will respect that. Because even if you do know everything about something, there's something you don't know, and that person in the back is always going to ask that question. So it's okay. Things are written.
Just don't accept the Q&A at the end. You don't have to. You can if you want, but you don't have to.
Yep.
There's a secret. All right.
And then Into the Box Latam, again, we're looking at December 1st and 2nd, and CF Camp, we've heard nothing as of yet, so we're not sure if that's going on. And then Comms.tech, if you want to find out more conferences, you don't have enough to fill your day, they got plenty there. So lots of online options, in-person options, many different languages, and some of them very generic too, so really good. Okay, let's get into our blogs, tweets, and videos of the week.
I noticed in our own internal show notes, we now have corners.
Yep.
I've nicknamed it the Ben Corner for a while, but now it's official in our show notes.
Yep.
So we have a...
Sorry, go ahead. Jinx, you're it.
we have a couple of things here from Ben. The first is a tweet about... apparently, Lucy doesn't like handling 2.1 million items at once. Kind of ran out of memory. So... that was fun.
Yeah. So he said, he's basically going through this into chunks of 100, and he had no ideas the algorithm he wrote would ever encounter 2 million items, but I guess it did. And so he's like, time to rework it. But the thread was really neat because, he wanted to be sure that everyone knew, like, it handles hundreds of thousands of items pretty easily, but it's basically, it's at that point, it's like, whoop, is that the threshold? And so, of course, I had to respond that Luis Mahamo is screaming, use CV streams, because streams, can definitely handle this type of thing. It only pulls in a little bit at a time and processes what you need. But, some people in the community were responding and talking about, throttlers, looking at streams, different things with, like async and, and he actually pulls in the Fusion Reactor to look at it and see what it's doing and stuff, so... I thought that was a really cool little tweet to see what people are, responding and everything. So
there were some fun things in the thread. This was user-provided data. So once again, never assume your users will give you something reasonable. They'll always end up giving you 2 million items at once. And the second part was, I think we need to hear this more. Now's the time that Ben said he's going to go rework the algorithm, right? When it didn't handle it, not because he, not some scientific, I need this to be the most perfect algorithm ever and be as efficient as possible. It was when it needs to do more, when it's not handling the workload. So
yeah, premature optimization.
We all need to remember that. Yeah,
for sure.
So we'll include the link to that tweet. Again, check out the thread for more fun, especially Ben's test, which is expect server to crash. That
Yep.
was at the very end. Made me happy.
Yep. Okay, so next up, again from Ben. So we had one about always returning collections from data access layers, or as DAO in Cold Fusion. So this one was kind of interesting because, a lot of people deal with sort of queries all the time, and then other groups and sort of thought processes like ORM gives you back arrays of objects and, different things like that. And some people like arrays of structs. And I know you had CF collections that you built to try and sort of, support having a collection that's iterable and more like some of the other languages. And so this is sort of him going through that thought process of how does he handle it, like does he pass back a collection? What if they don't get any results? Do you throw an error or not, or do you just give back an empty collection, or that type of thing? But he basically was triggered all this because of the JS Party episode on the Postgres.js podcast. So yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting. What do you think about all this, Eric?
Um, I think I think defining what your data access layer is kind of the question. If you think query execute or CF queries your data access layer, that's already what it does. It will always return either a query object or an array. I actually still like, what Ben was talking about, where you can throw exceptions when you expect one record and it doesn't come back. In QB and Quick, we use the or fail convention. So maybe you have a method that's get or find, but if you add or fail, it will throw an exception if that doesn't work out. So you can kind of choose at the time. Is QB your data access layer, or is it a service layer? I don't know. You choose. So I think both are good. I can see though why, if you're interacting straight with the database, you want it to always come back as a collection, because that's how a database looks at everything. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. The further up, the higher up, the more you abstract it, and then having errors that allow you to bubble it and everything makes sense. But again, if you're filtering an array, and you want to see are there any records searched, throwing an error on the search being 0 is not really accurate, because 0 is an accurate search result. So, yeah. But
yeah, it just comes down to, like, I don't know. Maybe I don't care as much about naming my layers. But I can see the benefit of the very bottom being an array, and then you might do something on top of it. Whether you call that data access, repository, service, whatever, it's fine.
yeah.
Use the words you want.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're writing queries, that might be, deeper down. But again, if you're using something like, Hibernate or Quick or Query Builder, where you're abstracting a lot of that out, then, you already kind of have that. So, yeah. But again, I always like reading Ben's thoughts, and he always weighs stuff up, pros and cons. So
yeah. So last one in the Ben corner, we're talking about instrumenting cache hits and misses with Fusion Reactor. So this hails back to a post Ben did about Fusion Reactor helping him know that he could cache all the things he wanted to cache. He wasn't running out of memory. He wasn't using too much there. And so he wanted to add it in by configuring his application to tell Fusion Reactor when it hit the cache or when it missed it. And along the way, does some refactoring to compose that behavior instead of inheritance. So if you've ever heard the phrase prefer composition over inheritance, you can come to this article and see an example why. So, yeah, I loved it. I love Fusion Reactor. He's still using his own instead of our Frappy API on ForgeBox, but that's fine. They both do the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. So another good one from Ben. So lots of good stuff there. But now, I was just going to make a quick mention that in Content Box and even in the CB debugger, I think, if you have the cache box tab enabled, cache box is built into Content Box, and so it'll actually tell you how many hits and misses you have on different things, and it's kind of cool too. There's like a little pie chart and everything, and it's kind of cool. But definitely Fusion Reactor gives you way more details. But
I have to go look to see if that's in CB debugger. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Again, I'll have to see. Okay, so Adam Cameron Corner. So he had a few blog posts this week as well, and he kind of had like a little series. It started off with him, basically implementing dependency injection on a CF Wheels website, and then basically working through it. And so there's 3 good articles here. And so again, I will share my screen for those watching. So the first one starts, dependency injection, and again, ColdBox does a lot of the stuff for you. If you're using, Wirebox, everything's sort of connected for you. So this is, him trying to basically, use it elsewhere. And so, he was saying how CF Wheels' collections and everything, their models have a lot of other things added to them to make them more functional and do different things, but he was worried about bloat and everything else. And so, sort of walked through the whole process. And I liked how he had like 0.1 baseline container. So he sort of worked through the steps very, simple, very laid out, nice and easy to follow along and stuff. So, second piece is make sure CF Wheels is operational, and then work down, get a working model. So this one's really neat. So I think it's, it'd be really good for you guys to walk through. And obviously he ran into a couple of issues. Developers, that's what we do, right? We find issues and then we try to work through them. And so the next blog post is about a day in the life of trying to write a blog post article in the CFML ecosystem. And so this one here, he's talking about some of those issues. And then he says, here's how far the article got before the wheels fell off. And so he's trying to add a ColdBox logger, which is the next article. And so he sort of walks through the things. And again, so really detailed, going through, adding stuff through, walking through the process, etc. So I like these articles because you learn from other people's mistakes, and it's nice to sort of see that detail. And so Adam's very thorough and clear, right, Adam? So it's good to see those there. And so then the last one was adding a CFML logbox logger. Adding a logbox logger to CFML Wheels app via dependency injection. So we worked through those issues and basically go through that whole thing. So yeah, really good. And again, if you're using a different framework, obviously ColdBox tries to handle all those magic pieces for you, trying to get things together. But if you're trying to tie something in with Framework 1 or CF Wheels, these would be really, really helpful learning experiences to learn from. Did I cover it all, Eric?
It was a good example of test-driven development, I think, especially the red part of the red-green refactor loop. I know I've helped people write tests before, and they're like, yeah, everything's passing. And I'm like, okay, but did you see it fail? Like, did you change something that should make it fail and it failed? Because if it didn't, then you don't actually have a test. And he ran into that. I think it's in his second article where he talks about he expected this to throw an exception, and it did not. It was green, though, so if you're not being careful on that, you're like, oh, yay, everything passes. When in reality, everything's broken. You just weren't testing for it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. Adam's very TDD oriented, and I really like that. Yeah, and so he says he hastens to add that I get that all other frameworks baked this in, so it's well-trod ground. The issue was that CF Wheels doesn't have it baked in, and so yeah, that's.
I think it's interesting to see how to set it up too, because both DI1 and Wirebox let you use it in any application. If you have a legacy app that you're wanting to get this, I mean, Wirebox is one of the best parts of ColdBox. You can install it in a legacy application before you've even started converting to a framework. So highly recommend, and this is a good example of how to set that up.
Yeah, and that's the first thing I usually do is I add Wirebox, and I usually add some Logbox, and try to use CB mail so I don't accidentally email the world when I'm in development mode. So those are a couple of things that I try and get going early. But yeah, for sure. Like I said, really good blogs, and yeah, lots to learn from. Okay, so back to the rest of the CFML community, right?
The ones that didn't write 3 blog posts in a week, yes.
Yeah. So we had one from Zach Spitzer, and this one is a new feature, and they're wanting to show it off a little bit, and there's a snapshot out. And so it is the sanitize HTML. And so this basically uses the OWASP Java HTML sanitizer. It's similar to the get safe HTML, which uses the anti-semi, which says it's currently unimplemented, which is interesting. But yeah, so anti-SAMI is really good for this type of thing. I know that Ben Nadal's obviously written blog posts about that and his with his comments and everything. But this is a new one here. So there's a snappy shot. So sanitize HTML. You can find more about it in here. But talks about some of it. And again, there's nice comments here to make it useful. So
Interesting.
yep.
Okay. We mentioned a tweet from James Moberg about any CF developers having a cheat sheet for quickref.me. And Gavin had mentioned earlier, if you have one, this is a great opportunity to get a pull request up and promote Cold Fusion in some of these spaces where it may not be as visible.
Yep, exactly. And so I mentioned a couple that Pete Freitag has. He has like a cheat sheet for CF script, and he has like a little cheat sheet for Cold Fusion. They're not PDF, obviously, like most of the ones here, but this quickref.me, has a bunch of languages, right? Again, we want to put our language up here on the list. So these types of sites, if you see them, I was thinking we should make a list somewhere so we can, basically start working on them and get them up there. But yeah, it's kind of nice to have that type of community effort to get more stuff there. So I know the Modern CFML book that Louise wrote, there's probably something in there. We'll probably wrap something else and put it up there. But if you know of any that are already made, let us know. And yeah, it'd be good to get those out there.
Yeah, I'm reminded our community can be very active. Do you remember with the Code Wars trying to get that in, and they were looking for more people that wanted it, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is the most feedback we've gotten on any of these languages. Okay, we'll get this in.
Exactly, and we mentioned on the podcast and a couple of tweets, and we had 30, 40 people go harass them about adding CFML to the list, and they did it.
Encourage.
Okay, well, nice. Yeah, encourage is the nice way to put it. But that's the thing. Sometimes you gotta you gotta justify yourself a little bit, and so it's nice to have the community come together. So if you see stuff like that that's missing it, and you think we should be there, then let us know, and we can try and make some noise and get it up there. Okay.
All right. A breaking news, maybe, but the breaking blog post from Charlie Earhart. There are new updates released for Java versions 8, 11, 17, and 18. Now I feel like reminding people that 17 and 18 definitely don't work with Lucy. I'm not sure about the latest versions of Cold Fusion. So 8 and 11 are probably the ones you care about the most here.
Yep. And so they have bug fixes, security fixes, and so it goes through and explain. But yeah, like this news for CF audience, you can get the Java updates from Adobe now. You should not, for now, use Java 17. Again, yeah, the new ones aren't quite covered. So, but yeah, the new Java updates is really kind of weird. They went to like every 3 months they released a new version, but the stable ones stick around longer, and the TLS, yeah. So, lots of good info in here. Again, thanks Charlie for being so thorough, because it can get pretty confusing pretty quick when you start messing with all your Java versions.
Hey, and let's leave you with a tweet from Mr. Brad Wood when he was at DevNexus, which is reminding us the first law of software architecture, which is that everything in software architecture is a trade-off. And if you think you have found something that isn't a trade-off, it just means you haven't discovered it yet, which is maybe even scarier.
Yep. You don't know that you don't know. That's always a scary one. But yeah, so that's from the keynote of DevNexus. Pretty good point. Wow, lots of good content there this week. So thanks everybody for getting your stuff out there. And again, if we miss something, let us know so we can add it. We do try and follow on Twitter the CFML and Cold Fusion tags and have RSS feed set up and everything, but we do miss stuff. So let us know and we'll try and get them in the show notes. So, okay, next up, CFML jobs. So we got, 5 new jobs, and I think one of them might have been out on time last week for the episode, but 5 jobs, including April 12th last week. And there's a few good ones out there. So we have Senior Cold Fusion Lucy Engineer, remote in the US. Ooh, Full Stack Developer at Cold Fusion in Aurora, Colorado. We got a Cold Fusion Programmer in Washington, D.C. We got a technical operations, co-fusion engineer in New York, New York, and then a technical operations in, that might be the same one. Sometimes they look pretty similar. So that might be in the New York one as well. So a few good job postings there. And then Ortus is still looking. We're adding to our team. So if you want to get onto the Ortus site, we have ortussolutions.com/about-us/careers. And there's a jobs channel in the Box Slack team now too. So I don't think there's one in the CFML Slack, but there's one in the Box team Slack. So there's lots of places to go look. And if you have anything that you want us to put on the show and on the show notes, let us know and we can get that added as well. But there's lots of things out there still. So, okay. Next up, let's talk about FORGEBOX Module of the Week. And have you seen this one, Eric?
I have. I was excited for this one. So this is our own SQL formatter by Michael Bourne. So in a few of our libraries, but specifically CB Debugger, we want to show you nice formatted SQL because when we get the logs out, it's just one big string. And in the past, we've been able to kind of dig in and use the internal Hibernate classes that were shipped with the ORM implementations. But in Lucy 5 and the Adobe 2021 now, those aren't included out of the box. So you could easily be in a situation where everything broke and or just didn't look good. And so this is a library that stands on its own, doesn't need Hibernate, and we can include in CB Debugger now to format your SQL code based on some awesome work done by other people, other Java libraries, and Michael has brought it all together here in a CFML module.
Yep.
So you can choose your specific dialect, so it can understand that, or SQL or standard SQL. And I fully expect there to be lots of people complaining that it doesn't format it the way that they want their queries, because everybody formats their queries differently.
Yeah, that's always an issue, but it's
I don't know if Michael's and Michael hold out, but I don't think his has any way to pass in like configuration for how to do the formatting. The Java one lets you like change the indent, uppercase some things, lines between queries, column lengths, but don't do it. Make it like prettier. Just it is what it is. Get over it.
Yeah, we need to look at that. I mean, I know that he has the API docs, I believe, up on the SQL. Nope, it's not up there. So I have to check with him and see why. It's a broken link to the API docs, so I don't know if he hasn't formatted it yet, or I know he moved it into the Ortus repo, so maybe that broke a couple things. So anyway, it's real new. Try it out. Yeah, we can do that. So, yep, SQL formatter. That's our module of the week. Okay, so next up we have our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week, and this one was something that Eric was like, "What?" So R in VS Code. Now, anybody know what R is in the chat? It's a computer programming language. It's just the letter R. This is something that came up recently. My wife was doing an interview for a master's program, and they mentioned using the program R, and she wasn't sure if it was actually the letter R or if it was some word that sounded like R, and she didn't know what it was. But I've used it quite a bit in college for a lot of statistical programs and everything else. But VS Code now has an extension that supports R programming language, and it allows you to do stuff like syntax highlighting, code analysis, and actually interacting with the terminal, viewing data plots and workspace variables and all those different types of things. So it's pretty cool for someone who's maybe still at school or just doing research in general. It's kind of a simple language that really evolved, and now it's like the thing for stats analysis and everything in R. So it's kind of neat. They've got the whole debugger now too, and actually part of the main VS Code actually they have a topic about getting started with R. So it's kind of neat that they're reaching out to different environments, the community types, universities and everything else. So if you want to find out more, you can look at R and VS Code, and you can find out about getting up and running here. It's got the little topic, so they have topics in here, so it talks about it, and I mean, they look kind of crazy. They look like almost the Apple IIe scatter plots and stuff, but it has that built in right now into VS Code. So it's kind of neat. So apparently I'm going to be helping my wife with her master's degree when she does her statistics, and I can do it from VS Code. Or she can install it and do it from there, because the program that you usually use it in, not as cool. I'll tell you that much. So yeah, so I wonder if anyone's actually used that before. But I thought it was cool. If no one else does, I guess, well, give us more suggestions for next week. Okay, so that wraps up our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. Last but not least, though, we got our, what you say, brilliant Patreon supporters?
Brilliant.
Word of the week, brilliant. So, these supporters are personally supporting our open source initiatives to give us, things like CommandBox, ForgeBox, CodeBox, TestBox, all the different boxes, and most importantly, the Ortus open source stuff. It funds things like cloud infrastructure that, ForgeBox package management and everything that works with CommandBox that we're also reliant on. Because trust me, if something happens and ForgeBox is down, we get a lot of people complaining, because it shows how many people are using our stuff now, and it's really cool to see that. But our Patreon supporters, make that possible, because your funds, for this podcast means that we have more funds for other things. So we really, want to thank them.
And if you're interested in supporting us through Patreon, you can check out patreon.com/OrtusSolutions. If you subscribe at a bronze package and up, you get a ForgeBox Pro and a CFcast subscription as a perk. As well as all Patreon supporters have access to a private forum on our community website, community.ortussolutions.com, and a nifty profile badge to show how brilliant you really are.
Yep, and if you pay annually, you can save 10% as well.
So do you mind if I list the names of our brilliant Patreon supporters today?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you to John Wilson with Synaptrix, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Mario Rodriguez, Giancarlo Gomez, David Bellinger, Dan Card, Jonathan Perrette, Jeffrey McGee with Sunstar Media 6, Dean Monder, Joseph Lamery, Don Bellamy, Jan Yannick, Laxma Tertrahadi, Carl Von Stetten, Jeremy Adams, Didier Lesnicki, Matthew Clemente, Daniel Garcia, Scott Steinbeck with Agri Tracking Systems, Ben Nadal, Brett DeLine, Kai Koenig, Charlie Earhart, Jonas Erickson, Jason Diger, Sean Oden, Matthew Darby, Ross Phillips, Edgardo Cabezas, Patrick Flynn, Stephanie Monkey, John Wish, Kevin Wright, and Peter Amiri. Thank you all for your support of this podcast and Ortus Solutions.
Yep, and Peter said he wished he could join us today in the chat. He's been in the chat the last few weeks, but due to time zone with traveling, he wasn't able to make it. So he's going to be listening. So we got your message, Peter. Don't worry. We recorded it for you. You're all good. But we really appreciate those coming in the chat. And Charlie's put more information about the Java update is in the chat there. If you guys are in there, check it out. Basically, the Adobe updates will be there for those Java things very soon. They usually go pretty quick, but they weren't there at the time he wrote the blog post there. So, so lots of good content in the chat. Yeah, we had Adam Cameron in there as well, talking a little bit, and I said Daniel and Scott Steinbeck. So it's good to have you guys chatting along with us. So we appreciate it, and yeah, hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you all next week, right, Eric?
We will. Have a great one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.
Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernizeordie.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.